And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the streets of the city we love. It's a drizzle Gary Lake kind of night here in Providence. It is pouring out. But that's still no excuse not to be out at your favorite watering hole, dining establishment. Come on downtown to Providence. And particularly tomorrow is the culmination of Pride Week. All day over on Water Street, you'll see the Pride Festival going on. Vendors, churches, political organizations, yes, of course, the Libertarian Party of the great state of Rhode Island will be there. And we will be marching. 8 o'clock is the kickoff time for the nation's largest illuminated nighttime Pride Parade. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Please follow us at Pawtucket is Home, our special apolitical Pawtucket Red Sox feed. And, of course, coalitionradio.us, where we try in a timely manner to get up all of our recent podcasts. So, joining me in studio here on the Go Local Live studio at 90 Way Boston Street is my good friend, full disclosure, Libertarian comrade, and former state representative candidate Daryl Gould. Daryl, welcome back to the Coalition.
Thank you very much.
So, I tried to introduce this segment in my best fake news kind of voice.
I heard it. You definitely sold it.
There's madness afoot in the city of Bristol Warren. But let's sort of start from the scratch. First of all, for folks outside of Bristol Warren, explain, if you will, how the school system is organized.
Okay. We are a regional school district, have been for the last 25 so years. That district encompasses obviously Bristol and Warren. Bristol is larger, and they carry, it's almost double the population, so it's almost a 2-to-1 as far as our representation on school board, things along those lines. The district recently has been, for people who follow education news, there was actually a relatively large case because the funding formula with which we fund our public schools, and actually I'm getting away from that term. I'm starting to call them government schools.
Government schools. Government schools.
I think
using most schools.
And I'm not saying that just on principle. I think part of the challenge with using the word public is when I say the word public, most people think of people. It's you and me. It's people in the community.
Right.
And it's all of us working together with the school. And there are certainly times where that's the case. But I think government is probably a more apt description of what we experience with our school district. We deal with a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of waste, inefficiency, poor decision making, and ultimately the masses suffer as a result. So while education and its education issues are near and dear to my heart, I don't think that I would compare schools more to our experiences with the DMV, the Department of Taxation, things along those lines, more so than this very positive experience that the word public might lend to.
Right, because public schools, you think of school fairs and the PTO and bake sales and cute kids happily playing out in the jungle gyms, which by the way aren't allowed to exist anymore, right? And you can't do cake sales anymore, and the PTOs are filled with, well, anyway.
And it's certainly not a knock on all the people the parents and everybody who volunteers, the teachers who teach, all the people who sacrifice and try and put the energy into try and make this a better place for all of us.
Right, because I mean, one could argue that, particularly in Rhode Island, that local PTOs, local citizenry are really the glue that kind of holds together these broken school systems, and quite frankly, that somehow are managed to be occasional successes despite the best efforts of the people who run them. Is it fair, from your reflection, because I want to get into this a little bit, you've been involved in this issue for quite a few years. This is not the conversation today in terms of the current issue isn't reflective of a parent done wrong. Right? This isn't, you're not Johnny come lately to the argument. You're not showing up for the first time. Outrage, outrage. You have had a multi-year commitment to education.
And my reputation precedes me with our superintendent and the new principal of the school my children go to. I've been involved in ed issues. It wasn't something I intentionally got into, But when you have kids in the school system and you see things happen, and when you're vocal, then you start to build alliances with other families. So I've been very fortunate to work with families on bullying issues, IEP issues, ed issues, PARCC testing, standardized testing, Common Core. What is all this stuff? So on a regular basis, my job as someone involved is really to inform and educate. It's not for me to tell people to opt out. I know good people who don't opt their kids out, and they certainly understand the reasons why I do it. But this is, to each their own. So my job, like I said, is kind of shed some light on some of these things so that people can make informed decisions.
Right.
And if it's something where we need to stand up for the students, then so be it.
So let's talk about testing.
Okay.
At what point in time did testing come into the forefront in Rhode Island schools?
In Rhode Island, it came in with our last ed commissioner. I honestly believe that, and it appears nationally.
That would be Deborah Gist, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So Deborah Gist, she was the villain. She came in. She was the one who really is part of No Child Left Behind. This was this big push for high stakes testing. The standards with which these were based upon, which the Common Core standards, these are flawed from Jump Street. There were no K through 12 educators who actually helped write the standards. The one individual who actually was a K through 12 educator on the math side actually walked away because he said he couldn't endorse this,
Right.
And he was blackballed after he walked away. But they're not nationally benchmarked tests. These are created by a company called Pearson Education, and the quickest description of Pearson would probably be they're the Monsanto of education.
Now, prior to the PARCC test, there was what, the kneecap?
The kneecap. The kneecap was specific to New England. All the New England states got together. They came up with a standard, and that was the test that we used for years. Massachusetts actually, who is one of the states that lead the country in education, they actually developed their own test. We will be in the future, starting next year. It's kneecap 2.0. It has its challenges, but I don't think it's as dangerous as PARCC testing. PARCC testing.
Well, let me get to a fundamental here.
Sure.
In your opinion, as a parent and as someone who's well educated on the process, is clearly an activist, you've run for statewide office. What is the role of testing in a student's life and in their academic career? What should the role of testing be?
Well, it depends on what kind of testing.
Right.
On a regular basis, our children get there are different standardized tests. There's STAR testing. There's other forms of that in addition to PARCC. But there is constant measurement of our children's performance, more so than we've ever seen at any time in education history.
Right.
So I don't think if we got rid of PARCC testing, which we are, I don't think it's being replaced. But if we got rid of those high stakes testing altogether, I don't think we'd see a detrimental impact to the district or to education.
And what role should testing be, in your opinion, should play in the evaluation of teachers?
None. The challenge with high stakes testing is there are, depending upon a ton of variables, how the child tests. There's written tests, there's online tests. There's been research to show that the written tests, kids perform better than the online. So there's all these variables. Some kids don't test well. Some kids get test anxiety. They literally stress out about these tests to the point where they get physically ill. When you start getting to the high school level where their performance is a lot more pressure because their ability to go to the college of their choice may be at play. So I'll hear stories about, and this goes with school rankings and everything else, kids where they're contemplating suicide because there's so much pressure on themselves because of these tests, this testing. So what we've seen is, and New York was a little bit ahead of the curve than everybody else, so we've been able to see New York and see how these things played out there and assume that this is just the ed reform that's being rolled out everywhere by good people like former Commissioner Gist. When these tests come out, it's all about, we're doing this for the sake of the children. This isn't a teacher measurement tool, this isn't a school measurement tool, it's strictly for the student performance measurement. What eventually happens is once Pearson gets their hooks in to the state, then ultimately what happened in New York was they start using it as a tool to measure teacher performance.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not a good measurement of how effective a teacher is as far as reaching their students. So what happened was they start rolling that out as a teacher performance. Now, generally what would happen is it's almost like a 3 strikes and you're out. If you don't get a certain level of performance on the test for your whole class as an average, you would be rated as a bad teacher. If year 2, you'd get a warning. Year 3, you basically say you can no longer be a teacher in this district, and you're cut and you're gone.
But let's look to the nature of children in general. I mean, you're dealt such a wild card when you're a teacher. You're handed these mostly great set of little kids who have, I mean, it's remarkably obvious. You have all sorts of skill levels, all sorts of environmental issues, all sorts of potential medical issues involved these days. Literally, it's the luck of the draw.
Yeah, and I mean, a teacher can't be held responsible if the child lives is living in poverty. They don't have food when they go home at night. These kids don't have, and there are kids in this country, sadly, and people might roll their eyes at this. They don't have electricity in their house, so if they're going to do their homework, they got to do it before it gets dark because they can't read. Right. Again, they don't have food, so they're not being able to focus because they're more worried about am I going to be able to eat something more so than can I do really well on this test.
So we've come to this place now where testing has become paramount.
Certainly.
How is it then that Massachusetts? What are we doing wrong in here in Rhode Island? And I know that's the ultimate open-ended question that we could spend a week on, but there's this incredible dichotomy. On one hand, literally, and for example, on my front lawn, I could see lower taxes, a better economy, and better schools, literally from my front lawn as I gaze off into the distant promised land of Massachusetts. Yet here we are, Providence, which really, both economically, geographically, is a microcosm. Right. We have tough cities. Massachusetts has some pretty tough cities. We have all the same issues. Why are we so far behind? And why does testing, at least superficially, and I say this carefully because I don't know, because my kids didn't go to public school.
Government school.
Government schools, thank you. By the way, we've just issued an official name change. Schools in Rhode Island will no longer be referred to as public schools. They will be government schools. That's spelled G-U-B-N-A-T. So testing am I wrong? Does testing work in Massachusetts and not work here? What's the special sauce?
It's not as high stakes. When some of the challenges we've seen and I can really only speak to our district and how we do
right,
things.
That's fine.
Obviously, we've had challenges in years past at the high school. The challenges with the high school environment is if you have, say, a foreign language class, you may have in French 2, you may have sophomores, juniors, and seniors.
Right.
And they test by grade. Mm-hmm. So they would say, okay, we're testing the sophomores for the next 2 weeks, and the sophomores leave the class. And then after that, it might be the juniors. So as a teacher of that class, you have a third of your class who isn't there, and especially when you talk about something like a foreign language, it's cumulative. So if you miss time, you're going to suffer. So basically learning stopped in the high school environment when they were doing testing for a period of weeks because kids were so frequently out of the class that they really couldn't do anything to move forward. We've seen, you don't see that much, that's extreme at the elementary level. But again, for the kids who opt out, and all 3 of my children have opted out every opportunity we've had, it's something where they're not learning. And fortunately, we have some really good parents, some of which I know very well, who, when these kids are put in a conference room for 2 weeks straight, we'll send in some activities and education-based stuff. Where STEM-based learning, where these kids are actually doing something while they're there, and they're not just rotting on the vine, for lack of a better term.
So, kneecap goes away. I remember the political sturm und drang surrounding kneecap. You had the spectacle of state legislators taking the kneecap test and failing. No surprise there. I'm not sure why we were shocked by that, given the quality of some of our self-appointed state leaders.
Yeah.
Then it was replaced, just goes away. PARCC comes in.
Mm-hmm.
You referred to the company behind it as sort of the Monsanto of education. Give us a background to tell us about the company.
Pearson is as coordinated operated as you're going to get. It's difficult in education because obviously you want the best of intentions. We're dealing with students and their education. Monsanto, I said Monsanto, Freudian slip. Pearson, the challenge with Pearson is they really integrate themselves with state and local government and federal, to be honest with you. They basically get the government to tie a lot of funding in the form of grants. There's actually a 95% participation rate required by the state or by the feds in order to get some funding. So when you opt out and when you mess with the school's purse strings, that's when they start to get punitive, and you realize that this is not just all of us working together to help each other.
Because big education has very much become like big defense, hasn't it?
Big defense, big pharma. Anytime you have, it's based on special interests.
You got this concentrated source of money with one sole arbiter of it, which is why presidential elections are so important, because, you've got the flavor du jour every potentially 4 to 8 years. Right. It's just enormous amounts of money at stake because we've taken away so much local control and we've sold ourselves to the federal devil.
Right.
The Department of Education, which, as we like to remind people as libertarians, didn't exist that long ago.
And as you well know, I'm not a Trump guy, but I gotta be honest, when they announced that they're talking about getting rid of the Department of Education, I wasn't necessarily disappointed.
Right.
Department of Education was Jimmy Carter's creation, and I don't know many people who think very highly of his tenure as a president. I think people speak highly of him post-presidency.
As an individual, yeah.
As an individual, he's a very generous man.
He's a righteous man.
But his tenure as president isn't necessarily given a gold star by most, even those in his party.
Right, which is why he was short-lived. So you've got big pharma now in the form of big education and big government. You've got the purse strings. There are so many issues in our day-to-day life where government's ability to withhold our own money that we give them.
Right.
Have I said taxation is theft tonight? We give them, they then hold it like the carrot in return for taking these tests. Are these tests, are we teaching to the tests in Rhode Island?
Oh, certainly. Any parent, and again, certainly in our district, when our homework is all practice tests. It's all Pearson printed, ripped out of the book. It'll say PARCC practice tests. There's also, the behavior in the school certainly changes when testing season comes into play. We noticed that, so for example, for the past couple of years, anything that will benefit higher test scores is certainly encouraged. So we see things like, for the 2-week period where my children were, or our school was in testing, research has shown that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and so when children eat breakfast, they get higher test scores.
Wow.
So they offer free breakfast at the schools for the 2 weeks. Rules are relaxed. Research has shown that chewing gum helps kids concentrate, so kids are allowed to chew on gum, provided you take the test. So that's where the inequality comes into play, where, again, because it's such a small percentage of people who are opting their kids out,
right.
It may be 1 or 2 children in a classroom. So for me, it's reprehensible as a teacher to go to your class and say, hey kids, we're all taking the test except for Abby Gould. Everybody gets gum except for Abby. And this is just obviously very...
So we have test shaming.
Oh yeah, certainly.
That's astonishing.
We've had children getting donuts when they take the test. Special privileges. You can bring in your fidget spinners, which drive all teachers nuts these days.
Yeah, I hear that.
But interestingly enough...
I'm thinking of getting one for my wife, who's a teacher, by the way, for her. And by the way, for the record, my wife teaches in the dreaded private sector. So it's just, there's madness afoot.
Yeah. And when testing season's over, then the memos come out. Fidget spinners are no longer allowed. Reminder, gum isn't allowed in school. So they're willing to relax these things when it suits their needs, but as soon as...
So this is taking over the whole culture.
Oh, yeah. We had hope.
I never knew.
No, I know. And we had hope, Pat, when Commissioner Wagner came in. And I haven't had enough exposure to him individually. I think he's had some interesting ideas. Some of them I question. But at his face, from what I've seen, he seems fairly genuine. Not that you can trust most people in those types of positions because there's their outward face and their inward-facing self. So
Their outside voice, their intent voice.
Yeah. So we've seen things with Mr. Wagner where I think he's creative. I think he wants to see more autonomy from a school-to-school basis. He's less district-focused. So where most districts we need equality. Certainly with us because we're a larger district because we are regionalized. We want equality with everybody. One size doesn't fit all. And part of the challenge with being in our district, certainly on the Warren side, is because we are the smaller side of the equation, we basically don't get much of what we want or possibly need. So there's a real inequity with things like, for example, and these numbers are roundabout estimates. In my children's school, there's one school nurse for 700 children. Now, when we all went to school, that might not sound that bad, but
Right.
given the rate that these people are tasked with handing out medication to elementary school children, it's a constant, it's like a bread line in Russia.
It's a different world.
Yeah. So they're overtasked. We've lost people because they're stressed. And on the other side of the coin in Bristol, and some of it has to do with we have one single elementary school and we have the middle school for the whole district in our town. What we found is because they're smaller, they may have one nurse for 200 students, one librarian for 200 students. We have one librarian for 350 students. So it's inequitable, and there are things that we work at. And I think that's part of Wagner's goal is let's take this, stop being even across the board, and just start looking at schools on a case-by-case basis.
How well do Bristol Warren kids do on these tests?
It depends on what your definition of well is. The interesting thing about PARCC testing is when they created the test, there was no passing score. It's actually arbitrary. So what you do in the first year of PARCC testing is everybody takes the test, and they actually set the standards so that at least 50% of the kids are not proficient. And the goal is let's set the bar high and drive towards that. What they also do is use that as a tool to basically control these schools. Because if you're put in a place where you're already failing right out of the gate, you're then required to make certain steps forward as far as your progress and improvement in your test scores. And if you don't do those things, that's where you start losing control and the special interests come in and start dictating how things are being run. What we saw in New York for school measurement was initially, again, it's that 3 strikes and you're out. So they'd start measuring schools by it. If you failed the first year, you got a warning. Second year, you're in deep trouble. Third year, there were districts that basically said you can either shut down the school, turn into a charter school, or you'll be absorbed by a different district. So it got really heavy, and especially, again, when these tests haven't been proven to be accurate measurements of student performance, how can you base a school's existence on it? And obviously there's a push with charter schools to then come in and do that incremental attitude and push towards, again, now it's special interest education. And that's where the problem lies, like we see with a lot of things. The problem is not necessarily with private industry, it's when private industry teams up with government and uses that influence to force its own agenda on the citizenry.
Why did you choose to take your children out of the PARCC test?
For me, the largest thing would be probably the unmitigated data mining when it comes to our children. What people don't realize is, and Pearson is very, very secretive with the test. Teachers are not allowed to talk about the test. They are custodians when it comes to when the test is delivered. They're really, they hold these things close to the vest. So what some of the testing has shown is there are basically psychological profiling questions hidden in this testing. So they collect up to 170 data points on your child, not just what school do you go to, your height, your weight, it's your socioeconomic background, do you believe in pro-choice, what's your moral standing on certain things. Wow. And the challenging thing with that with Pearson is, by proxy of their contract with the state, they own that data, and they can do anything they want with it. So an extreme example, but one that certainly makes the point, is if you are a Catholic family and you want your child to go to Holy Cross, where my wife attended, it's a Jesuit school. Theoretically, Holy Cross could buy the data from Pearson about that student and look and say, oh, well, based upon their psych profile, they're really not pro-life, they're pro-choice. Those aren't the kinds of students we want in our school, so they can be exclusive based upon data that was collected in a fashion that most parents would find appalling.
So this data is available for them to use as they see fit.
As they see fit. So that's my big concern. I'm not worried personally for my kids about test anxiety. We're firm but fair. We're education driven in our house. Our kids are all high performers. They love school. They love it, learning. So that's not a challenge for us. I know it is for other families, and I know how severe that can be. So I certainly have a lot of respect for the families who deal with that stuff.
Right. So what brought this all to a head today, and you and I talk a couple times a week.
Yep.
Full disclosure. You have your older daughter is a high performer.
Yes.
Great kid.
Awesome.
Completely kooky.
Love her to death.
She's what every kid should be.
Yeah,
she's happy, works hard.
Model child, in my opinion.
And she does her best at everything. She works.
Yep.
Everything I've ever seen her do, she works very hard at everything.
She's socially responsible. She cares for others. She's actually been in that school for 8 years. Mm-hmm. The school goes from pre-K to 5th grade. She was actually it's actually a fantastic program for special needs kids in our district. We have a peer program because research has shown that full integration with kids who aren't special needs actually drives these kids, and from a peer level really lifts them up. So she had to do some screening, and for 2 years she was actually part of this program where she was in a fully integrated classroom with the special needs kids. We met some of the best families we've dealt with. The kids are amazing, mm-hmm. and we've gotten to see them grow up until Abby's moving up ceremony this morning, actually.
And I want to make this point. Almost all kids are great kids.
Yeah.
In the right environment, kids are great.
Not to compare them to dogs, but if you don't have a good kid, it's usually because of the owner.
Yeah, absolutely. So she was slated to be recognized at a national level.
Correct.
And the Department of Education, that same big government education department, seeks to recognize children, even at the primary school level, of considerable accomplishment.
Correct.
She was denied this recognition, though.
Also correct.
And this is a kid who's works pretty hard at it.
Top performer, model student.
Right. Why was she denied?
This goes back to your mention of test shaming. There is certainly an us versus them when it comes to testing. And because, again, there's funds tied to these things. Mm-hmm. There's performance measurement as far as teachers and certainly administrators as far mm-hmm. as how many parents take these tests. There's really a strong push. When we first, now PARCC has been in play for 3 years. It was a 3-year contract, and finally we went through the contract and they're not renewing, and we're moving on to this NECAP 2.0. We always opted our daughter you're only eligible 3rd grade, so 3rd, 4th, and 5th. We opted Abigail out all 3 years. My twin sons, Jackson and Wesley, also great kids. We opted them out this year. There is, like I said, it gets punitive. Year 2, the district actually passed a district-wide policy about standardized testing. And they use very strong language, saying we expect all students in the district to take these tests.
You will take these tests.
My response, I think the first year was, I expect to make $1 million this year, and I think there are a couple people who are going to be disappointed. So we opted out, and at first they wanted to, counsel us and try and, lead us.
Did they use the word counsel?
At times, you'll hear that word. It's, reason with us, talk some sense to us. And we have some great people on our school committee. We have some less than desirable people on our school committee. Some people just throw their hands up and be like, I don't know what's wrong with you people. I don't see a problem with it.
You people.
Yeah. You people that put you in your elected office. Yeah, you people.
Yeah.
So we've pushed back over time. What we saw after that policy was, this is just basically to intimidate parents. There are a lot of parents who, many of which view school as a wonderful place called elsewhere, where you send your kids so you can go to work, school, stay home, whatever the case may be. And there are a lot of people who don't want to rock the boat. You may see more of that in an urban environment, where you may have people who, there's a higher concentration of people who speak English as a second language. They don't feel comfortable fighting against the district. Right. They may not be legal citizens, so they're certainly not going to go rock the boat for fear that if you complain about Susie's school, then you may be on the next train out of the U.S. So there's those kinds of factors as well. This year, and every year we have parents who reach out to us. We have groups on, they're called Collapse the Core, and there are town and local groups, and when they say Collapse the Core, Collapse Common Core. Right. And there's some great ones and there's statewide pages on Facebook that people can follow if they want information about the testing. These are, again, most of these, if not all of these parents, and I am an amateur when it comes to ed speak. There are some people who know far more than I am and who could literally sit here for days and talk about really granular stuff. And that's where I get a lot of my information from. But it's that they're there to help you. They're not there to push an agenda or force anything on you. It's your choice. It's your children. Do what you think is best for your child. So this year, what happened, we opted our children out again. And because Abigail is, she's my oldest, everything is with her as a first. So this is my first fifth grader moving up into the middle school. So this is our first ceremony. So I don't know what traditionally happens in these kind of ceremonies because I've never been in attendance. So I was at her school, Hugh Cole Elementary, earlier in the week, and I was approached by the principal, who actually comes from your district, up in Cumberland, a woman by the name of Cindy Giroux, and she's very pleasant, and she's only been in our district for a couple of months, so I don't necessarily have a ton of experience. That which I do have has been very positive. What happened was I was at school for another event, and she approached me and said, I know you're probably going to be attending the step-up ceremony on Friday, and we're handing out awards, and I just wanted to speak to you to let you know there's an award that Abby, you would expect Abby to receive, but because you opted out of PARCC testing, she wasn't eligible for it. So I took her at her word. And she also mentioned there was another student that fell under the same circumstances. It's a small school, and then the people who opt out are even a smaller community, so you can quickly figure out who that might be.
Right.
And so I reached out to the parents of that student, who I'm friends with, and ironically enough, we are polar opposites when it comes to political philosophy. Me being a libertarian and they being self-professed communists.
Excellent.
But they're good people, they're smart people, and they care about their kids just as much as I do. And much like as libertarians we see on a lot of issues, we tend to play in free space.
Right.
So we can grab people on different issues, and it's not, we carry this mantra that our party has, and it may evolve over time.
We're a philosophy rather than being a
issue-based.
party. Exactly.
So, so she made me aware. I reached out to this other family, and they just happened to go on to the president's, it's the president's program for awarding excellence.
Right.
And so they went on the page and the criteria for these awards. Now, these awards are not for what they did this semester, what they did this year. This is something where it's cumulative over the last 3 years. And our grading systems is no longer, and at least at this level, it's not A, B, and C. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 being you're not meeting, and 4 being exceeding with exception. So what you have to do is maintain a 3 or 4. You can get no 2s over that 3-year period. You also have to be a model student. You can't have behavioral issues. And one of the criteria provided is you have to score a certain level on the standardized tests. It also says in place of standardized tests, and this is at the principal's discretion, you could get letters from 2 people in the school. One would have to be a faculty member that taught the student English or math, and a non-faculty staff member to speak to the child's contribution and behavior. So are they a part of the school community? Do they deal with extracurriculars? How do they treat their fellow students and things along those lines?
And I want to stress, I've read the program, and this on the very front page, and when we publish this video blog, we'll actually link to the various pages. This is not this other approach, getting the 2 recommendations, is not buried in the fine print.
Oh, no.
No, it's very specific that it's either or.
Right. It's they branch all these things are required, all the things I mentioned as far as your academic performance and student citizenship, for lack of a better term. And then it literally branches off, and you can do either or.
Right. And this, by the way, is completely at the volition of the administration of the school.
Correct.
There is no outside review required. There is no permission required. There is no law that can be broken. There is no funding involved.
Nothing.
This is simply an effort by the Department of Education to recognize wicked smart kids.
Basically, yeah.
Who not only are smart, but have also consistently over a period of, for a little kid, a long period of time, have consistently excelled at every level.
Right. More than, for most of these kids, half of their academic career to this point.
And at no point does giving them this award take away from anyone else's performance. You're not competing for a spot with anyone. It's simply a question of whether you met well-publicized, well-documented guidelines,
Yep.
or you didn't.
Right. Pretty black and white.
Your daughter was denied this.
Correct.
Again, for a young person, this is very, very important. I mean, when you're young and you excel at that level, that means you've given up things.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't play video games for that extra hour or two.
No.
You did your homework consistently every night. You did the reading.
She makes us late for school because she's reading a book instead of getting dressed in the morning. All of it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But there's real sacrifice for a kid. I mean, we tend to, while on one hand our society tends to celebrate children to a level that's never really existed before, at the same time we tend to marginalize the efforts that they expend relative to their age.
Right.
And what's astonishing about this, and this to me is the real killer, 2 points. As a society, particularly here in Rhode Island, we routinely complain about the youths, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
We villainize the youths, even though, as you point out so adroitly, that kids that age very much are a product of their skills, but also very much a product of their environment. So instead of looking for a reason to celebrate this young person's efforts, we turned it into a negative. And we turned it into a negative, and if I could approach the bench counselor, please tell me if I'm wrong. We turned it into a negative over her failure to participate in a test that we've already decided to abandon.
And that was at the choice of her parents, not herself.
Wow. And this is the tone we set, I say we, the royal we, as a community, because the educators that we hire have chosen to behave in this arbitrary, capricious manner. That stinks.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow. And when I have 3 kids, the prospect of paying for private school, it's not a reality for us.
Right.
So
It's daunting to say the best. And we're realizing now that as a society that we're creating, these are my words, not yours, we're creating this sort of educational ghetto. When I mean ghetto, I mean I'm throwing back to the term of World War II, where you had a an ethnic, religious, racial, sexual community that was ostracized or not able to participate in the benefits of life at the same level other people were. Now, that's a very bland, generic explanation, but we're really, with the disparities that are evolving between government education and private education, it's my belief, and I'd love your opinion on this, that we are permanently marginalizing a significant sector, a significant group of our young population.
We're basically just trying to, because, and it's interesting, a lot of these things that they're surfaced, and this is the case with all this stuff, we talk about it all the time. There's this do-gooder attitude and let's help somebody. We saw it in higher ed with student lending. Everyone deserves an education, so let's guarantee student lending. Well, now schools didn't have to compete on price anymore. And what we've seen is, since 30 years ago, since that took place, we've seen the cost of higher education quadruple.
Boy, have we. Yeah.
But that's the challenge. And so now we have kids leaving college with, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. It's something they can't get out from underneath. Their education is not worth what they're paying for it, and it's basically it's the special interests that gain the money. So it's these do-good things that we try and have the best of intentions, but don't realize the massacre that we leave in our wake.
Right, the unanticipated consequences. So, in good faith, you approached the superintendent of the Bristol Warren School District.
Correct. We saw obviously the standards, and quite honestly, Pat, we thought it was good news. We just assumed that the district wasn't necessarily aware that this was something that was available to them as an option.
Right, that the second option that you could choose to get the approval, if you will, of a teacher and either an administrator or a professional staff person.
Right.
All right, to vouch for the kiddo.
Yep.
And then, again, at no cost to the school district, at no cost or expense to any other student, give these kiddos the recognition that they so richly not only deserve, but have earned.
And also doing it within the guidelines of the program as it was written at the national level.
Right. No lawsuits, no special counsels, no insider deals. No one parked on the job.
Right.
No one. What's this guy? Other guy. Anyway, so you approached the superintendent,
and
with the other parent.
Correct. So we had initially contacted him through the principal. She very quickly got back to us and said, "We're sticking with the testing standard because that's what we do in this district."
Right. Because the standard is more important than the student.
Right. This is all about principle at this point. And this is the punishment we get for opting our children out. And again, the goal is so their hope. And my kids are very, they're very mature for their age when it comes to issues like this. I'm a political person. They ask questions. They see all these things, and they know that not everybody has the best of intentions, and things tend to run a little bit deeper than what they may seem on the surface.
With your children, in particular your daughter, there's an old Irish saying, she's walked this earth before.
Right. So she doesn't hold it against us. She doesn't get sad when it doesn't happen, she doesn't get the donut or she doesn't get the gum. She doesn't come home and say, "Mom, Dad, why'd you opt me out? She understands their reasons, and she trusts us. She knows we're always going to try and do things for her in her best interests.
Right.
So we reached out through the principal. We got a second no, and then at that point, actually went down to the superintendent's office in the hopes that I could catch him between meetings. Waited for a couple hours, was unsuccessful. He did come out and say, "I'm in meetings. I'm probably not going to be able to meet you, but I figure I'd take a shot."
Can I just a rhetorical question? This is again me asking. Why are they always in meetings? Have you ever known? Is it me? Are they always in meetings?
Yeah, he's frequently in meetings.
Right.
And I mean, I was out in the hall or the reception area for a couple hours.
Were you like the little kid?
I wish I had meetings like this.
Uncle Buck? Were you like the little kid in Uncle Buck?
Maybe. No, but it's. I mean, not that I think that they shouldn't have the ability to have a good time, but I mean, whatever they were discussing, they were certainly yucking it up, and I was jealous that I wasn't a part of the meeting. But
They weren't using their inside voice.
no. So I was contacted, which I appreciated, by the superintendent that evening by email. He said, "I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to meet you. I'm available between 4 or 5 on Thursday of this week." So we set a meeting to come out, and I reached out to the other parent who was in the same circumstance and said, would we like to go out? And we had sat down and talked about earlier how we're going to formulate our request, and it was all very positive. We didn't think that, given what the information we had, there was no reason to fight this.
You were rational. There you go again.
I know. And logic does not always win in the end, and it's something my wife tells me frequently. I need to stop looking through things through that lens. I don't know if I'll get there. So we had a meeting. The other family, the other father, actually had a brilliant idea. So why have us be the purveyors of doom as far as our kids are concerned? Let's let the superintendent tell them why he's not allowing them to receive this award. So we actually brought both of our kids. These are 5th graders. We asked, we're very. I'll go as far as my daughter wants me to. I'm not here to do things on principle to embarrass her, or I will fight for what's right. And if she said, "Dad, it's not a big deal," no problem. But that's not what we got. My daughter, all my kids know I will run through walls for people and causes that I believe in. And this is just another one of those cases. And sometimes you need to stand up and you got to do the right thing the right way for the right reasons. So this isn't foreign to them. And so the physical reaction from the superintendent when he left his office and saw the 2 students in the reception area with us was telling. He was not pleased. And that's understandable. I think he probably thought we were playing dirty pool.
I think that's a wonderful lesson. What's the cliche? Teaching moment.
Yeah.
Your children, in a respectful environment, met head on with their first run-in with bureaucracy.
Yeah. And it's their education. I am not my daughter, and I'm sure she has questions about this that I don't have. Mm-hmm. It's her award. It's her efforts that are being questioned or penalized. So it was an interesting meeting. When we first sat down, and we basically came with, let's come with a bunch of solutions. Let's fix things. Let's make things better. Clearly something's broken here. You're punishing your best students. These are kids who are literally passionate about education and learning, and they're the ones that you're being punitive with because, again, a choice that their parents made. So my first, the superintendent, Dr. Mario Andrade.
Well, we jump into the question.
Okay.
All right. Since with the inclusion of the PARCC test, the other requirements were empirical in nature.
Correct.
So, is there a possibility, and I'm just asking, I'm committing the ultimate sin, I'm asking a question I don't know what the answer is, but is there a possibility that a child could have had the appropriate grade point average, participated in the PARCC test, could have been a little jerk, and gotten the award?
Our district does apply behavior as well. While it's not a requirement at the national level, they tack on their own criteria. So there are kids who, from an academic standpoint, they met all the requirements, but if they were a troublemaker in school and had behavioral issues, then yeah, they certainly wouldn't get the award. My first question was, because we did some research, and we were told that this was a policy because the 4 principals in our district had agreed that this is how they wanted to do things. And I had asked if it was a written policy. How can you enforce a policy if it's not written and people aren't made aware of it? The example I gave to my children was, let's say Wade Bossett has a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, but it's not posted, and when you drive 20 down it, I give you a ticket for driving 5 over. It's not fair to you because you weren't made aware of what the limitation was. So,
and at no point in time was when you opted out, was it represented to you that this could be a
factor?
Yeah.
It wouldn't have changed our opinion.
right? But at no point in time did they think it's so. At that point in time, did they introduce it as a possible mitigating factor in her receiving the award?
And I'm surprised because they've thrown everything else at us.
Right.
Stricter policies, shaming the kids. They've tried everything. So
And again, my words not yours, but is it possible they just decided on the fly we're going to show you?
possibly. I mean, and there's a group of us. We're vocal parents. We fight for our children. When there's bullying issues, we're there. So there becomes this, and I think part of the challenge, what I've seen is I may be very passionate about something. It might be an instance of bullying. We've gone through it ourselves. I will approach it as pragmatically and as reasonably as possible. One of my sons had an issue where he was punched in the stomach last year. The challenge of some of these things is the school doesn't even follow its own policies. So when there's physical behavior like that, a note is supposed to go home with the parents, just notifying them that your son was involved in a physical altercation. They went to the nurse, everything's okay. They don't do those things, in part because the principals of these schools are measured on how many of these incidents they have, so they're policing themselves, and it gets a little bit tricky. So when it gets characterized as my son wasn't punched, he was poked or pushed with a fist in the stomach, it's insulting to your intelligence, and you might come back with some strong language yourself. And the challenge being, ultimately, I can move on past that. Once we get through the issue, I'm right back to your principal, I'm parent,
Right.
and let's work together for the sake of all the children. I think some people may have difficulty flipping that switch on and off.
Well, you have that with government authority figures in general.
Yeah.
There's a certain personality type, we've all met them,
Yeah.
whether in a variety of facets of government that are there, A, to make a buck, nothing wrong with that, B, because they crave that type of control.
Right. And and you can tell in Dr. Andre's office, there's a I'm going to call it
Dr. Andre, the
superintendent. He has a motivational statement on his wall, and it says something along the lines of, "The king must move if he expects his subjects to follow," which I think is a telling statement as someone who's leading a school district.
Yikes.
So
Yeah,
it's you can't make this stuff
up. We're both involved in an organization. Tomorrow, should I refer to myself as the king?
The king. I don't know if I'm going to be a subject in that crowd.
That could get pretty ugly, yeah.
So,
by the way, just as a quick thought, has anyone ever tried to compile at any level the sheer middle management style and amount of effort that's involved in this madness?
well, the test itself is actually one of the most expensive standardized tests ever created.
But I mean, just in terms of the sheer amount of people and management and time, yikes!
It's crazy. It's like anything else. For every dollar we send to the federal government for education, we get 18 cents back, and that 18 cents is tied to a bunch of unfunded mandates so for example, the federal government wants 1-to-1 laptop ratios with our kids. This is being pushed by Dell. It's also, we have Dell, we have Microsoft in our schools, and again, it sounds good. It's, hey, it's so philanthropic.
And that's why, just like we have Goldman in our,
Right.
willing to give this money to companies and loan this money, and
So we
as
can
if they're
create
doing it right.
the next generation of cube monkeys for Dell.
Yeah, exactly. I had to listen to the real Democratic Party chairman tell me that on a lively experiment today, how great it all is. Do you know anybody who thinks we're in great shape here?
I don't know how when people make decisions to say they want government to control different parts of their life, whether it be healthcare or education, what government are they talking about? Because I don't see this benevolent government that bestows gifts on us. They're punitive, they're wasteful, they're Disingenuous.
Well, I always talk about, and you've heard me say this a million times, this sort of myth that government participation in any event, whether it be educational, political, social, whatever, injects a note of fairness into it. And by this situation, we can tell that nothing, absolutely nothing, could be further from the truth. You have a young child here who is a high performer academically, who through the sheer peak, if you will, of a bureaucrat getting aggravated in a kind of something out of Brezhnev era Russia, you will do what we say. You know, what does the student say in Bulgaria? You shoot pictures, we shoot you. You just operating just clearly, and I'll just try to keep it somewhat high level here, at a peak towards a young child.
They defer back to the P word, not Trump's, but policy. And it's and that works for a lot of people. That's what our policy is. Well, can't change that, and people go away. But
Of course, of least resistance.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, the ceremony took place today. We've got a couple minutes left. What finally transpired?
So we were when we left, we had actually our last request because there was other standardized tests that the kids took. They scored high enough to qualify. A test called the STAR test. They wouldn't take that. They insisted that it be PARCC. We came up with all kinds of solutions where we gave them every opportunity to do the right thing. Do the right thing for the kids. I want you to be the villain. I want you to be the hero.
Right.
And so ultimately what happened, our last dart, for lack of a better term, was, how about this? You recognize all the kids who actually are receiving the award, and then just make mention. There are 2 students here who did everything academically, everything from a student community standpoint to earn this award, but they didn't participate in parking, but in the PARCC test, we still want to recognize them. He was non-committal when we left. He said he would talk to the principal.
By the way, that seems like a remarkably gracious way to have made the problem go away.
No one's compromising their principles. You're not breaking any rules. We weren't. Now, his response was, you're only giving me 24 hours to do this.
Oh my God.
This is a phone call. We weren't even asking for a piece of paper.
This is nothing legal. There's nothing money involved.
It's a phone call.
I need 24 hours to convene the high committee with the Sith Lord.
Right. So now the ceremony was 10 o'clock this morning. At 10 past 9, I received an email from the superintendent saying, Abby and the other student, and I'd love to mention his name because he's a brilliant kid and he deserves all the recognition, but I'm trying to be respectful to his parents.
Right.
But we'll call him L. So Abby and L, basically they would be recognized. So we are at the event. They call the kids up for another award, go up, take our pictures, go back down. They call the President's Award. And we go up to take pictures, and they name all the kids, and then call the parents up to take their photographs. So me hoping that, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, I went over to the principal who was standing off to the side and said, have you spoken with Dr. Andrade? Because he told us the kids would be recognized. Well, they won another award, so technically they were recognized. That was underhanded, disingenuous, and a mark of someone who I question their ability to lead a school district. And to think on any level that that's acceptable from his point of view, it was willful. And again, it was just punitive and sticking.
Well, it's distasteful too.
Yeah. We're talking about kids.
Snarky.
Yeah.
So he showed you.
So at that point, I did what comes natural and what I thought was right. One less informed parent said I pulled my best Kanye and grabbed the mic. So after the kids were all recognized, I further recognized them and said, for those who don't know, the criteria for this award is really heavy, and I went through it obviously earlier. This is multiple years, high performance, are you a good kid, behavior, all of it.
What's he doing while this is going on?
He's actually not in attendance. This is the only people in attendance were our current, as far as administration, our current principal who's been there for 2 weeks, and the other principal who I'd battled with for years, and she's not a bad woman, and we just had different opinions on things. So I went to the microphone, I recognized the kids that were there, I said, this really is something that should be commended. And I just made reference, I said, listen, there are also 2 students that met all of the academic requirements, every requirement for this test, but we're not receiving it because their parents opted them out of PARCC, and I think that's wrong, and I'd like to take an opportunity to recognize Abigail Gould and Elle. And everyone applauded, and I quickly returned to my seat so the proceedings could continue.
So you were not escorted out in handcuffs?
No. And that was it. After this ceremony, I had a number of parents come up to me. Some of them opt-out parents, others not. The ones who weren't want to know more about PARCC testing and standardized testing and why they've been in the dark. And other parents who opt their kids out who they knew because maybe their kid wasn't in that school for all 3 years, or whatever the case may be. There are other things that disqualified them, but they opted their kids out, and they appreciated the fact that someone was willing to go and stand up for these kids.
The spectacle of a highly compensated, successful educator being so capricious is just disappointing.
Yeah, it's sad. It's the state of education, and we need to do something about it. So my hope is for anyone out there, if you have, my name's Daryl Gould, Darylgould. You can find me on social media. You can reach out to me. Please do so. I'm here to help. There are a lot of parents, like I said, many of which know far more about this and are more articulate on the subject. Reach out to these people. Learn more about these things. Educate yourself. Strength is in numbers. We get pushed around when there's only a handful of us and we're 4% of the population. But we've proven that people with very different views on a number of things can work together and, again, do the right thing for the right reasons.
Because to use their vernacular, it really is all about the children, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or at least it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me tonight. Daryl Gould, Bristol Warren parent of 3. He fought the law, and for now the law won, but I think the bigger point is going to resonate across the state.
And they've done nothing but thrown fuel on a fire that a lot of parents now don't appreciate the way that, and they've gotten some visibility into how the district and the administration treats the families and the students.
Wow.